Welcome back to In Depth with Academia. I'm host Richard Price, CEO of Academia EDU, and I'm thrilled you've chosen to spend the next few minutes diving into a fascinating piece of academic research. Remember, as I'm presenting this work in a neutral way, not endorsing, just exploring, so you can reflect and decide what resonates for you. Today, we're going to take a closer look at a paper by Antonio Delgado García. It's titled El Misionero Jesuita Arce y Rojas, Evangelizador Palmero y Mar en Sudamérica, which roughly translates Jesuit Missionary José Arce y Rojas, Evangelizer from the Palm side Ander in South America. Quite a title, right? So what's the core of this paper? What Delgado really trying to figure out here? Well, the key issue is this. What can we, from the life and legacy of José Arce y Rojas, a teach Jesuit missionary originally from the Canary Islands, especially as it intersects with broader topics, colonialization, indigenous relations, and the creation of memory in South America? And why should you care? Because, honestly, stories light on how histories, local, global, spiritual, and political, get built, remembered, and even mythologized. History isn't just in the past. It helps shape the present identity and values. Del's in the paper is biography, part deep dive into social context, part a graphical review, that basically history of how other historians told this story, which is of meta. He pulls archival documents, church records from both Spain and Latin America, and he threads primary sources like wills, church registers, university archives, and even oral traditions and art. If you like a good historical detective story, there's definitely some satisfaction in seeing how all this evidence weaves together. The paper opens by exploring José de Arce y Rojas' background, not just his family's religious devotion on the island of La Palma, but also the strict Tridentine Catholic environment of 17th century Spain, shaped by the ripples of the Council of Trent. All of this created a world where spiritual discipline hierarchy and, importantly for Arce, a powerful calling to missionary work were just in the air. So why this important? Because the foundation for understanding how and why someone like chose to leave a privileged life in Spain and risk on the frontiers of the Spanish Empire. His trajectory goes student in elite Jesuit in Spain, all the way to the muddy, dangerous mission routes of Paraguay, Bolivia, and Argentina in the early 1700s. Talk about a leap. Now, here's one of those places where the paper gets particularly rich for us as Delgado follows R as he learns multiple indigenous languages, works to mediate among various groups, and even helps establish entirely routes of communication and evangelization in South America. Some of these paths would go on to shape not just religious communities, but economic and political boundaries for generations. One insight that jumps is how the story of Arce's martyrdom, murder by Theagu people after a failed expedition, became over time a kind of spiritual and cultural symbol. Both in South America and back in the Canary Islands, there are statues, commemorative plaques, and even stories that filter into art cinema. Delgado mentions how parts of Arce's martyrdom are believed to have key scenes in film. You've seen that wild one man's echoing across and centuries. Let me just pause here and throw in a dig. Thinking about how stories are remembered, it makes me think of old local library back in day, where dusty books on the local hero's shelf sat untouched. It's funny, sometimes most stories are the ones tucked away, waiting for someone to dust them off and look again, right? Anyway, back to Arce. Delgado finishes up by arguing that R's martyrdom, and this is really interesting, wasn't just a moment of violent death. It was also a carefully constructed story, woven by the Jesuits themselves, serving to bind the group, energize new missionaries, and set up a heroic that their actions and legacy in the colonial period. He calls this construction discourse or discursive construction, if one get academic, lie, a deliberate shaping of memory for social, political, and spiritual. As you listen and think about what this means for you, the legacy of someone like José de Arce is a reminder. History is always being written and rewritten. The choices we remember, the narratives we repeat, and plaques we hang or the films we shoot, they cultural identity and memory today. Whether see Arce as a controversial actor in colonialism or simply as a symbols, a story that asks us to think about whose voices we honor and how we shape our own legacies. And remember, academic research doesn't use final answers. It opens up new questions, shows us complexities, and invites us, to reflect, maybe even to look again at the stories we think we know. All right, wraps up this episode of In Depth with Academia. Huge thanks to Antonio Delgado for sharing this research, and just to be super clear, I'm noting these conclusions, just sharing them and helping you engage more deeply. Keep questions, keep reflecting, and we'll see you next time for another academic adventure.